All right, welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we have a special guest, Pro Football Hall of Fame, Chief Communications Officer, Rich Desrosiers. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and this is a true honor. I told you offline, we're going to be there in about a couple of weeks. I've been to the Hall of Fame a couple of times, and to get to share this with my kids is really an exciting opportunity. And there's really a lot about the Hall of Fame to love. Even if you're not a football fan, there's just a lot of history there. And
Right.
first of all, kind of before we get into that, I just want to talk a little bit about kind of your journey to the Hall of Fame. And obviously, you've been in journalism for 35 years. Talk
Oh,
about how you have reached the Hall of Fame.
did you have to? I think you emphasized 35 a little too strongly there, and it's good to belie my boyish, youthful look here. I've been born and raised in Northeast Ohio. First professional job was, I guess, if I really want to say what my first professional job was, it was providing statistics to the local newspaper for our high school's football team. And I got paid $2, for a box score. And I thought, wow, what a country! I can watch football and get paid for it. Which was really about as close as my mother wanted me to get to the game. My mother was an emergency room nurse who was talking about concussions way before I think anybody else in the world. And her little boy was not going to play football, but her little boy wanted to be Dick Butkus. So this caused a
Mm.
problem. So I think I found kind of the next best avenue, which was to just enjoy the game from the sidelines and be involved in it as much as I could without being out on the field. And that led to a career in journalism. Uh, uh, and because my first real job then was with the Canton Repository in Canton, Ohio, just a very short drive from the Pro Football Hall of Fame, certainly the annual Enshrinement Festival was one of the biggest things that we covered year in and year out. And back in the day, we would produce upwards of a 100-page special section. I know you probably have a listening audience who has no idea can appreciate that, because that's going back into a different media time, well before podcasts and social media. But we actually did things in print, and because you didn't have the internet, if you wanted to research the players, and I had the honor of being the biographer, if you will, for Willie Lanier and Mel Blount and
Mm.
Fred Biletnikoff, you came to the Pro Football Hall of Fame and you went into the archives and you looked through the clip files. And I said, gosh, what a joy it must be to work here. And it only took me about 35 years, but I finally made it.
Yeah, and so you made it in the middle of a pandemic. Then how did that transition happen for you?
It was very interesting. Former President David Baker asked me if I would be interested in replacing a gentleman who was deciding to kind of for his second career, and he had been here for several decades, but decided he wanted to relocate and strike out on his own and start a kind of a one-person personal PR firm, which has been successful so far. So he made a great second career choice. And President Baker said, Rich, I think you might be a good fit to succeed this gentleman. And I said, let me think about it. And about 2 seconds later, I said, sounds good to me. I turned in my 2 weeks notice. I was an editor at a newspaper, but I had returned to the repository after a lengthy stay somewhere else, and had returned to the repository as its editor in chief. We were covering this story that people were just starting to pay attention to, called COVID, when I turned in my 2 weeks notice. And first day on the job for the Pro Football Hall of Fame was remote, and I worked remote for almost 3 months. It took me, a good 10 weeks to meet most of my coworkers in person for the first time. And so that was interesting, kind of discussing what we might do about our 2020 events from my dining room table in, April, May, June of 2020, when everything got turned upside down. But we learned a lot from that. We learned how to Zoom and and do things remotely. And in some cases that proves to be a benefit now that we can be a little bit more efficient. We can have fun this way, talking like a couple of guys just chatting about the Bears and football. How good is that?
Well, maybe not in 2022 fun for
Uh,
the Bears, but
we'll see.
I'm okay. Well, that's a good point. We'll see. Well, through the pandemic, then did that help you with the Hall of Fame? Kind of look at new ways to kind of bring the Hall of Fame to different people. Then,
right? Necessity's the mother of invention, and we had to learn how to do some things differently. One of the big elements of the Pro Football Hall of Fame is its educational programming, and where in the past schools would bring busloads of kids to the Hall of Fame and take a field trip, we had to completely revamp. Now, not completely, because there was some remote learning elements certainly for many years here at the Hall, but not to that volume and not to that extent. And a whole new curriculum took shape and a new way to deliver educational programming to kids. That was one way. But really, it was about, what else could we do to bring Hall of Famers into programming, that we couldn't bring them on campus. We asked several of them to do PSAs for COVID awareness, and several of them did that. And then when the vaccines became, quite honestly, a little bit of a matter of controversy, some of the Hall of Famers said, hey, we'd really like to be involved in educating the public on the importance of getting a vaccine, particularly in the minority community, where there was so much hesitancy kind of early on. And, folks like Aeneas Williams stepped forward. Marshall Folk stepped forward on a project we were doing. Chris Carter stepped forward. Guys, I'm gonna admit some embarrassingly, but guys just wanted to be involved in saying, hey, let's do some things. Drew Pearson, when he was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I think people got to witness the anguish that he went through when he wasn't picked in the class of 2020. It was very public. And then the joy on his face in 2021. And he's been a great ambassador to the Hall, since his election, and doing those kinds of things, spreading the message about, being smart, like early on it was social distancing, then it was getting the vaccine. And Drew's been a big proponent of that, messaging for the Hall as well. So, just to see those opportunities, to create those opportunities for the players and to find new ways for them to engage with the public was something we learned in 2020 and 2021.
Well, speaking of, telling the inductees, and I'm sure you've kind of heard the stories from David Baker, and, how did that start, where they were going to, tell them in person?
So David tells a great story, and David's a great storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
His first year, David became president of the Pro Football Hall of Fame in January of 2014, literally weeks only before the selection of that year's class. And they're in New York City. That's where the Super Bowl was that year. And they want to get the guys over to Radio City Music Hall for the news conference to announce the new class. So David's going to call each person individually and tell them, because some were waiting and able to, they were sequestered in hotels or whatever. He calls Derek Brooks because Derek was someone he had a relationship first. He calls Michael Strahan because Michael is in New York and can actually get to Radio City Music Hall in person, but he's got to navigate some New York traffic, so we want to give him as much time as possible to get over. Third call David makes is to Ray Guy. And Ray had been eligible for, and I forget the number, but I believe it was either 28 or 29 years of eligibility before he was elected. And David talks to him on the phone, and Ray, depending on kind of whose version of the story you believe, Ray has a moment where he's in such shock that he drops the phone, whether he passed out or just dropped the phone, whatever. And this moment goes by, and Ray gets back on the phone with David and says, Mr. Baker, I apologize. I had no idea how important this was to me to actually hear those words. From that, so carry out through the class of 2014, David comes back and brings the staff together and says, how can we capture those moments better? And working with the NFL Network and others said, hey, what if we have this knock on the door and let the public see that initial moment when a player, coach, or contributor finds out he's been elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And thus the knock was born. And the Hall executed those knocks at the hotel for the classes of 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. So now you get to the class of 2020 and can't do it quite the same way, and can't do the class of 2021 quite the same way, even still to that point. Not only were the players and the nominees reluctant maybe to go to the Super Bowl city, be in the hotel, but the selectors themselves, several of the Hall of Fame's panel of selectors, its selection committee, weren't sure that they wanted to be in the hotel, or their business wasn't sure they wanted to send them there for whatever reason. So we had to think outside the box, and the selection process was held virtually, and the informing of the class of 2021 was done by secret Mission Impossible, and actually going out to their homes, and in a couple cases their businesses. And this was all staged and highly integrated, in conjunction with the league and NFL Network and friends and family of the enshrinees, to let them know, hey, we're going to sneak up on, Charles Woodson under this ruse that he is filming something for the network for a playoff game. And all of a sudden, President Baker comes, around the back patio and says, Charles, I've got some news for you. Or they get Peyton Manning out on the field, and these coaches are, I think a lot of people have probably, seen the program around that, get Peyton Manning out on the field, and he's doing some reads, and a couple of his, his coaches from Tennessee, and Coach Dungy's there, and coaches from the Broncos and the Colts and Tennessee kind of all show up and just say, hey, Peyton, just want to congratulate you on a great career. And here comes David Baker to kind of, put the cherry on top of the sundae. So, to be able to surprise somebody like Peyton Manning, who is so thorough in his preparation on everything, and knows to the minute kind of where he's going to be and what he's going to be doing, was quite an accomplishment. And it's a testament to the players. It's a testament to their families. And a group I don't want to overlook. It's a testament to the gentlemen who didn't get into the classes of 2021 and 2022, because they knew that they weren't in about 3 weeks before the public announcement of who was in. And every single one of them kept it a secret. And it is a testament to their honor. It's a testament to their integrity, because they know that their day will come. It is very unusual for someone to be a finalist and not be elected ultimately. Once you kind of get to that stage of 15, very, very high a percentage of those guys eventually are elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So they know that moment's going to come for them. So, hey, don't spoil it for don't spoil it for any of your brethren, so that it's special for you too. And they really kind of took that to heart. So I certainly don't want to diminish how important that is, because any one of the ones who was a finalist in 21 or 22 could have blown the lid off of that secrecy and spoiled that special moment.
Well, yeah, and you kind of think about some of the people that didn't get in. Obviously, I'm a Bear fan, and a lot of questions about Devin Hester. Talk about that, and when someone doesn't get in like that, I mean, how do you deliver that news to them then?
Yeah, so I have to be careful what I say, because I was inside the room when the selectors discuss and nominate and vote the lists down. I can tell you that what I said a moment ago about finalists ultimately being elected, I am highly confident that that's going to be the case for Devin Hester. It is not a question of if; it's just a question of when. And I understand the folks who think, he should have been a first ballot guy, and I understand that means a lot to a lot of people, especially in that moment. But I will also tell you that many legendary players were not first ballot Hall of Famers. And it's not that the selection committee. I remember specifically with baseball. I remember a specific baseball selector who said, "I will never vote for anyone on the first ballot because I don't believe in that." Well, that's it's not the case that, first ballot guys are blacklisted in any way. I do think that the group who elected the class of 2022 was listen, it's a universe of 15 guys, all worthy of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. How do you pick, for anybody who said Devin Hester should have been, one of the 5 from the modern era going in, I'd say, nah, who are you taking out?
Right.
You are taking out somebody with Hall of Fame credentials as well. I think sometimes you just see the stars align a certain way. I think the class of 2022 reflects numerous players who had waited and waited and waited, like a Leroy Butler and a Richard Seymour and a Bryant Young and a Tony Boselli. And, they had all worthy candidates, all who had waited multiple years to get in. And so guys like a Devin Hester, DeMarcus Ware, who were in their first year of eligibility, they're going to get in. And I think the guys who waited a year or 2 or 5 or 8, when that call comes, and no one said it any better than Drew Pearson. When that call came, it was all water under the bridge on the wait. And John Lynch said the same thing. John Lynch waited 8 years and was a finalist for 7 of those 8. And the pain of not only not getting told you're going into the Hall of Fame, but under the old process, actually being in the hotel, waiting for that knock on the door, and instead getting a phone call that says, hey, John, this isn't your year, or Alan Faneca, this isn't your year. We had guys telling us, especially like in the case of John and Alan, who then went through how it was in 2021 to be surprised at home and not be brought to the hotel. Man, I'm so glad you're doing it this way now. And even the guys that got the calls in 2021 and 2022 said, hey, thank you for not bringing me to the Super Bowl and to the hotel. It's kind of embarrassing. It's tough to, it's tough to put on that smile and that game face, on Super, in the past, we would ask them to stay for the Super Bowl and be part of the fest. Who wants to put on a happy face when you've just been told, hey, you're not quite good enough this year? These are guys who throughout their entire lives rarely heard you're not good enough. They were good enough, and they are good enough. So the process, I think, is being very well received, not only by those who get in, who get that surprise, but even by the ones who don't, because, hey, I haven't been strung along. I'm told professionally in a very professional phone call. And we do tell them, look, your day's going to come. Hey, class of 2023 is going to be a great class, whoever's in it.
Well, from the 2022 class, what are some of your favorite stories from the reveal process?
Well, so in 2021, of course, Mr. Baker was still the president, and he did those knocks, on the door at John Lynch's house, on the door at Alan Faneca's house, at the Star, where Jerry Jones and Roger Staubach had helped stage, had helped set up Drew Pearson for that moment. Looking at 2022, new president, Jim Porter, takes over after David resigned last October. And one of the first things he said was, that's not me. David had that magnitude and that presence and had elevated that knock to a national level. And Jim said, I'm not David. I'll tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to see a Hall of Famer knock on a Hall of Famer's door. And so that's how things changed for 2022. And I actually think we're onto something, really special here, because who else could it have made any more sense to deliver the news to Dick Vermeil than for Kurt Warner to come up on his front porch and say, Coach, I've got some news for you. Or, Charles Haley to tell Bryant Young, or Charles Woodson to tell Leroy Butler. I mean, those moments, if you saw the 2022 reveal, Leroy Butler opens the door, sees Charles standing there and shuts the door, like, come on. And for 5 seconds, 7 seconds, thought maybe he was getting punked. And he says, you better not, he says, you better not be kidding me. You better not be making this up. And then from that moment of that spontaneous moment of kind of goofing around, the realization is, hey, this isn't a prank. This is serious. This is real. And and then the tears flow, and that moment when Richard Seymour sees Ty Law at his front door, and he that 1 or 2 seconds of realization about what it all means, and Ty Law says, "You know why I'm here," and Richard just you can see it in his face, his career, kind of passing before his eyes, and that realization, that his 4-year wait is over. And um, we had not only the guys who got the knock tell us how special it was, but the guys who gave the knock. Charles Haley has said multiple times it's one of the highlights of his career. It may be the happiest moment, other than being told he was in, was being able to tell someone else he was in. And we've already got guys calling us saying, "Hey, if so and so gets in a next year or the year after, would you please consider me to deliver that knock?" So now, not only are we able to change the lives of the people receiving the knock, but we've got guys who want to be the messenger of that news, and so that it really is helping to form that bond, between the incoming class and the existing members of the Hall of Fame. It was really special.
That's amazing. Yeah. And so we know who's in now. Talk a little bit about the behind the scenes, preparations that you're doing and your staff is doing for the Hall of Fame festivities.
One of the important things that we're getting real close to is unveiling the locker exhibits. That's one of the big moments for the incoming class. We asked them to send us significant items from their career that they would like to have the public see, that has some significant meaning to them. It might be a uniform. It can be oddball stuff. Certainly there's helmets and shoes and jerseys end up in these lockers, but then you get things like a terrible towel that somebody from the Steelers tucked into their uniform pants to dry their hands on, or Donnie Shell wanted to make sure that his Bible was on display, because that was an important way that he prepared for the game, was just in those last few moments before he went on the field. He opened the Bible, he read some Bible passages just to put himself. And I love to tell this story just because and there's many guys that this is true about, the on the field persona versus the off the field persona. But as somebody who grew up in Northeast Ohio, where the Browns and Steelers were such rivals, the Browns record against the Steelers has been putrid for the better part of the last half century, since the Steeler dynasty of the 70s. And Donnie Shell was just this constant nemesis. And it seemed like, of his 51 career interceptions, it seemed like 50 of them came against the Browns. And, to see him headhunting across the field, and the fear and intimidation that he put into opposing wide receivers. And then to think of him just sort of serenely sitting at his locker moments before going out to maybe clobber a wide receiver. He's reading a passage from Psalm 139, and then God said, and I made a joke once, and then God said, "Go out on the field and take a receiver's head off." And he closes the book and he runs out the tunnel, because that's how I pictured it happening. But, Steve Hutchinson sent us his shower slippers. They were his lucky shower slippers, and he wanted them, memorialized at the Hall of Fame. And Isaac Bruce sent us his high school letterman's jacket, because he was part of a really successful team in high school, and that was something that was still special to him. So it runs the gamut of apparel and tchotchkes and memorabilia, but it's their choice. What's fascinating about it is these lockers are what the players want displayed. We don't pick it for them. We say, send us something that means something to you. And Peyton Manning sent portions of a playbook that he had taken some handwritten notes in. Peyton the preparation guy sent us some X's and O's, and so we got a playbook from Peyton, some uniform apparel, and a knee brace. Because this is what kept his career going in the last couple of years, and so it's interesting to see what's important to the guys themselves.
So talk about that then. You talk about knee brace, or what is the process then from a game use item then all the way to the Hall of Fame display?
So it's actually a pretty involved process, and so we do the outreach. We do the outreach to the individuals. If it's in season and it's a milestone in the season that we want to capture, we'll go through the teams and just say, and some teams are actually proactive about it. They know that a player's on the cusp of setting some sort of significant milestone. Now, some of it's just spontaneous. If a Jamar Chase catches 264 yards of balls and sets a rookie record, you can't prepare for that. That just happens, on that Thursday, Sunday, Monday during the game. And then you reach out to the team, or the team reaches out to us and says, hey, can we get something to, memorialize, the achievement? Can we get Jamar's jersey, his gloves, his cleats, the ball that he caught to ultimately set the record, whatever that might look like. I remember I was sitting at home watching a game week 2 or 3 of the season. I think it was 2. Ravens line up to kick a 66-yard field goal against the Lions, and I'm thinking to myself, you switch from fan to Hall of Fame employee kind of quickly, and it's like, holy cow, it went through. That's a record. We need that ball, and we need those shoes. And the Ravens were really great to work with and really excited to share in that moment. So immediately afterwards, this is kind of a fun story. Immediately afterwards, we get the full uniform from Justin Tucker, except the shoes.
Oh,
He said, yeah, it just broke in these shoes. And I thought maybe he wanted to keep them because they were, like lucky shoes. I didn't know if he was superstitious or whatever. But for Justin, it's a fairly lengthy process for him to break in shoes, and he had just broken in this pair and didn't want to give them up right away because he needed to cycle this pair out and cycle a new pair in, and for him it's about a 4-week process. So he said, hey, in about 3 weeks I'll have my next pair of shoes ready to go, and then I'll send them to you. And he did. So now we have the shoes to complement everything else around Justin Tucker's 66-yard field goal. When Drew Brees was close to surpassing 70,000 yards, he was so close, barring something completely unforeseen, it was going to happen on this date, in the Superdome, so we were actually on the ground to try to, bring some item from that game, the ball itself, into that game. So, there's a variety of ways. Then when that item actually comes here, now let's take something like the football that Michael Strahan took into space. That ball actually and other items actually had to sit in almost like a quarantine room for a couple days just to make sure that there wasn't anything on it that we didn't, that it could be inspected and cleaned and properly preserved. A lot of times, this has, with old as we acquire old documents or old garments in particular, you just want to make sure there isn't a moth, that there aren't any moth eggs, on an old uniform before introducing it into the museum environment. So we have a little quarantine room that items go in, to be inspected and to make sure they don't cross-contaminate any other part of the museum collection. Then once everything's been inspected and photographed to be documented and the photographs stored in a database, then it goes into the collection. What probably would fascinate people is the percentage of the collection that's actually on display, and it's actually quite low. Now, a lot of that percentage is skewed by documents and pictures, which wouldn't necessarily be of high guest patron interest to look at. They like to look at the stuff, people like to look at the helmets and the balls and the jerseys, and maybe aren't necessarily interested in meeting minutes from 1960. However, they have, some of those documents have incredible historical value, and so they're preserved here. Documents outlining the formation of the AFL, or the integration of the AFL into the NFL and the merger, and correspondence from Pete Rozelle to Lamar Hunt and back about and Joe Foss, the old AFL commissioner, with Pete Rozelle, and how those leagues might come together, and would they play a championship game, and what would they call the championship game. And there's a document from Lamar Hunt to Pete Rozelle that says, I know you won't like this idea, but our championship game needs a catchy name. Wimbledon, everybody knows what Wimbledon is, and everybody knows what the World Cup is. He says, we need a catchy name for our championship. And he said, I was thinking maybe Super Bowl, but I know that's a dumb idea, and I know you won't want it. And I know that the deep thinkers at the NFL will be able to come up with something better. Well, guess what, right? Now the word Super Bowl has, and the Super Bowl's become such an immense event that 200 plus million people watched some portion of this past Super Bowl. I mean, and 24 out of the 25 highest rated television programs last year were NFL football games, and NFL owns Sunday night. No one even tries to program against it anymore. So to watch the game evolve and to watch the Hall of Fame document how the game evolves is part of what I take pleasure in, and part of what I get to contribute to.
Does it usually, you talked about Justin Tucker and everything, and does it usually take, a week or 2 weeks to kind of get everything kind of on display?
Yeah, it does. Even for Justin Tucker and the immediacy of that, it was, I think the following Friday when everything was put together. There's some graphics. Like I said, you just want to make sure everything is handled properly, documented properly. We create some graphics, just picture and some words to put in the case to explain it to people as they're walking. This isn't just some random pair of Ravens pants. This is significant. And the fastest is probably within a week, and sometimes it does take a couple. And sometimes like I said with Justin, excuse me, and the shoes, the player's willing, but they're just like, hey, I'm going to hang on to these gloves, for another couple of weeks, but you'll get them, and sometimes it might even take till the end of the year.
And then you also talked about, some of the documents. Is that part of like the Insiders Tour? Do you get to see more of the collection then?
Yeah, some of the very most significant documents are out on display. I alluded to some documents between the commissioners about the AFL, NFL, and the birth of the Super Bowl. Those documents are in a case that all guests can see, but something a little bit more of less universal appeal, let's say, a letter from Paul Brown in the 40s to Bill Willis. And Bill Willis and Marion Motley, along with Kenny Washington and Woody Strode, reintegrated pro football in 1946. And we are celebrating them this year with the Ralph Hay Pioneer Award, probably a little overdue, but it's happening this year. In 1946, Bill Willis and Paul Brown had some correspondence back and forth where Bill Willis, who had played for Paul Brown at Ohio State, just wanted to stay involved in football and knew that if there was anything to be done in football, Paul Brown was going to be able to make that connection for Bill Willis. But Paul Brown says in writing to Bill, hey, what would you think about potentially playing? He says, there's going to be this team in Cleveland in this new league called the All-America Football Conference. I think you could contribute to it. And Bill Willis, and we've talked with Bill Sr.'s sons, Bill Jr. and Clem, who were just at the Hall of Fame a week ago. Their father didn't even allow himself to dream about playing pro football because there was this unwritten rule that had been in effect in professional football since 1933. There were no African-American players in professional football between 1933 and 1945. Well, Paul Brown comes along in 1946 in this fledgling league. There's no rule written or unwritten that says black athletes can't play. And Paul Brown's like, I want the best players. Mm-hmm. And I know Bill Willis is going to help me win games, and I know Marion Motley is going to help me win games. I don't care what color they are. And that's how Paul Brown was. Paul Brown didn't care where you were from, what your ethnicity was, where you went to college, what color your skin was. Paul Brown wanted one thing in life: to win football championships. And he cut good players who didn't buy into the program. Paul Brown was Bill Belichick before Bill Belichick, and Paul Brown would cut a guy in his prime if he wasn't towing there was two ways of doing things: Paul Brown's way or the highway, and so Paul Brown brought in Mary Motley and Bill Willis. So that correspondence is in our archives to be preserved forever, not out on display. As I talk about it, maybe it's something that should go out on display now to help celebrate, Bill Willis and Mary Motley and Kenny Washington and Woody Strode winning this Pioneer Award in 2022. But there are things like that. There's lots of correspondence. There's draft cards.
Mm-hmm.
There's every media guide. All of those items are part of the collection at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And we're working every day, literally every day, to digitize all of that, millions of documents, millions of photos, so that fans everywhere soon will be able to enjoy all of that, from, the comfort of their own homes on their personal devices, and, to bring, really the next step and where we are probably behind a little bit and need to catch up a little bit is bringing the Hall of Fame to the fan, so that you, as a fan of the Bears, if you want to learn a little bit more about Dick Butkus or see what items, are in the collection related to him, can go on your phone and through an app, see a lot of that and learn a little bit more. And I think it's going to be really special, especially for the younger fan, because that's how they consume news. That's how they consume entertainment. To bring the Hall to them.
Tell you what, yeah, I mean, as a Cubs fan, one of the best things, obviously, them winning the World Series in 2016 was amazing. But the fact that they took the trophy on display, little VFWs, and I was able to go. Living here in Wisconsin, then I was able to go, it was maybe an hour drive, but I went and I, shared that with my son. I mean, something about, kind of being there. I mean, yes, we kind of see everything kind of online now, but something about being there and seeing it. And especially with, all of the memorabilia with the Hall of Fame is it's something you need to do, especially if you're a football fan, and just sharing that with your kids and everything. And I guess my question then, what are some of the newest features? Because I remember, I think the last time I was there was 2015.
Okay.
So it's been a while. And I remember one of the most memorable things was, sitting in that theater and then how it rotates. Does that still kind of do that?
It does. And it's just been updated with the recap of the 2021 season. So you spend the first part of that experience, that theater experience, getting a highlights look at the 2021 season, and it's a little heavy on the Bengals and Rams to kind of show their progression throughout the year, because they're ultimately who is going to play in the Super Bowl. But you get a run of the entire league. The fantastic finish. The Justin Tucker field goal. Other fantastic moments from the 2021 season, building this crescendo into the playoffs and all of the games ending on last play field goals and all of that. And then there's this, and all in surround sound, cranked up pretty high. And, the bass is, the heavy bass is making the entire place shake and all of that. And then the theater rotates, and on an even bigger screen, then you watch highlights from, Super Bowl 56, and depending on your fandom, it's the greatest thing ever if you're a Rams fan, and it was a tough loss if you're a Bengals fan. And if you're a fan of neither team, you can just, enjoy the fact that, that it was a really good game. And it's one of, it's NFL films and it's NFL sound, and everybody, everybody's mic'd up, and you get to hear all of that. And it's pretty special. So, that's one of the newer things. If you were if you were watching that game at home and you're a fan of all the great commercials too, you probably remember the commercial that featured the animated puppets that overrun Grandma's house when they kind of come to life out of the game that the two youngins are playing. And we actually have an exhibit that includes 8, the NFL. In partnership with them, donated to us 8 of those puppets. So I'll certainly not be able to name them all, but I know we have DK Metcalf. I know we have Sarah Thomas, the female official. We have Peyton. We have Lamar Jackson. And I think, like I said, in total, we have 8 of those puppets on display, along with a video that shows two things. It shows the commercial, and it also shows the making of the commercial and how they were able to animate these puppets. And so that's been a very popular exhibit, and that's been here for about a couple of months now. And we were really happy to acquire that.
So, speaking of new things as well, I mean, I've really gotten into doing the USFL podcast actually with my son. So we kind of do that. He's a 12-year-old, and we share that and talk about the preparations for the USFL playoffs and this weekend there in Canton.
So the games themselves are going to be the two semifinal games are this Saturday at Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium, and got a concert in. You can watch what great best ticket in town right now. If anybody if anybody is thinking about coming to Canton and it's just either a USFL fan or just a fan of football in general and needs a fix, needs their spring football fix, this is the weekend to consider it, because you can get 2 tickets and a Trace Adkins concert, and then a discount on admission to the Hall of Fame, kind of all in one. So for about $40, you can tour the Pro Football Hall of Fame, watch 2 games, and see a concert. You're not going to get very many better deals than that. This was a partnership with the Hall of Fame and Hall of Fame Village, which is the actual host of the games themselves, and the USFL and Fox, kind of all coming together and wanting to make a special experience, really for the USFL players. They played their regular season in Birmingham. They will all be here tomorrow. The players, they'll have a walkthrough of the hall. There'll be a couple of special presentations. And then the 2 winning teams are actually going to stay in Canton the full week, and they will have their practices here and do some other things in the community, and then play the championship game on July 3rd. So very excited about all of that. And Daryl Johnston is going to be in town as part of that, and he's got a couple of things he's doing in conjunction with the hall, a couple of things he's done already to help promote that game. So we'd love to see those stands full and have just fans enjoy competitive football. There were 5 good teams, two really good teams, 3 other good teams. There was a little drop off after team number 5 this year in the league, but you've got 4 really good teams competing for the championship this year, and I think you're going to see something special in the Hall of Fame too to reflect that. I can't give away too many of the details, but we will be commemorating the 2022 USFL season inside the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Now, are there plans to continue to hold it as long as USFL is, going?
I don't know. That's a great question, and I'm afraid I can't answer that. I think certainly some of that may be how the league. I know we would welcome it, certainly. Love to see the stadium being used. Love to see football celebrated in Canton at whatever level. The Division III NCAA Stag Bowl's coming to Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium, and the Ohio High School Athletic Association State High School Football Championships are held inside Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium. So we love to see it be used. We believe it's a showcase stadium. The NFL considers it its 33rd stadium. It is. It's small, certainly smaller than any other NFL stadium at roughly 20,000. You can squeeze some more in than that with some standing. I mean, you're roughly looking at 20 to 21,000 seats. But beyond its capacity, it is fully to NFL specs. The locker rooms, the press box, the lighting, the sound, the video boards are all to NFL caliber level. So anybody who gets to use that and experience it, we think it's really special. So certainly from our standpoint and Hall of Fame Village's standpoint, we would welcome anybody back who wants to. Another league that uses it is the Women's Football Association. Played its championship here last year, and I believe I don't know for 100% certainty that it's official for 22. I believe they're coming back in 22. Again, just another opportunity to showcase football, kind of in Canton, Ohio, birthplace of professional football. So I think if the league wants to do it, I know the city of Canton and the Hall of Fame and Hall of Fame Village would say yes for sure.
What would you say, someone visiting for the first time, I mean, what would they be most surprised about, once they get there?
If they were to come today, I think one of the things they'd be surprised about is how much building and activity is happening on this campus. I've used the phrase Hall of Fame Village a couple of times, and so there are two entities. There is the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which is the museum and the nonprofit side of the equation, where we preserve the history of the game and honor its heroes and promote its values. And again, and it kind of going back to what you said, you don't have to be a diehard football fan to have a great takeaway experience here, because we tie the values learned in playing the game of football to everyday life. So even if you're a man or woman who's not the biggest football fan, but you're kind of getting dragged along by somebody who is, I guarantee you're going to have a great experience here. The Hall of Fame Village is the for-profit land development part of this, two entity sphere, kind of under this Hall of Fame umbrella. So Hall of Fame Village is building a Center for Excellence, which is a mixed use space facility, and a Center for Performance that's an indoor, can be an indoor practice facility or multi-purpose. They'll be able to have basketball tournaments in there or volleyball tournaments in there. Later on, and there's 8 youth fields, and right now, literally from February through November, almost every weekend there'll be either a soccer tournament or a lacrosse tournament, or it might be tackle football, might be flag football, all kinds of activities going on those youth fields. Later on, getting into 2023, be another hotel on site, and there's going to be a water park. And sometime soon here, there's going to be a giant Ferris wheel and a zip line. So if you come today, you won't get to enjoy all of that. You'll get to enjoy some of that, but a lot of it's still in development. If you come at some point in the not too distant future, you're going to be able to experience something that you can involve the whole family for multiple days. And, certainly visiting the centerpiece attraction, the Pro Football Hall of Fame Museum, but then also getting to do all this other great stuff, and retail too. I mean, there's going to be restaurants and sports bars and some opportunities to do some sports gaming, which is being legalized in Ohio. And there'll be some sports gaming facilities on the campus. And one of the things I'm looking to is Isaac Bruce's has a franchise called Smush Cookies, and it is an ice cream sandwich with a Toll House cookie on the outside. And I want to know when they open their doors, you're going to find me somewhere at the very front of that line with my credit card ready to stock up on those, because that sounds really good to me.
I'm gonna have to talk to Brian Urlacher. I think he missed the boat on the Smush Cookies. He should have done that.
I don't know if you can see it. I think maybe what you see kind of on screen with me right now is Coach Knoll, and on that wall behind me is an homage to some of the legendary coaches, and it includes Coach Knoll and Coach Hallis and Coach Madden and Coach Shula. On one of the other walls is my personal homage to the Chicago Bears, and a very an item that I really enjoyed acquiring, partly because I wanted to have it, and partly because acquiring it meant a nice donation to a very good cause for wounded warriors. I have a 3-panel picture with Brian Urlacher, Mike Singletary, and Dick Butkus. So autographed pictures by them, and it says Monsters of the Midway across the top. And certainly Brian continued that great legacy of Chicago Bear middle linebackers that, and it really goes back even before Butkus, to guys like Bill George, who's a Pro Football Hall of Famer, who was really one of those first kind of stand-up, he wasn't really identified as a middle linebacker, but it's really what he was, because he was that middle guard, and he'd stand up and back, he'd stand up, back up off the line by a step or two, because he was so good at reading plays and so quick at getting, to the ball. He kind of became that really one of those very first middle linebackers, and that lineage has come down. And isn't it interesting that certain franchises are identified, kind of at certain positions, and there's quarterbacks, associated with this franchise, and there's running backs associated with this franchise, and by golly, there's middle linebackers for the Chicago Bears.
Just not quarterbacks, unfortunately.
Not, yeah, Sid Luckman.
No, right. Jay Cutler. So you talked about coaches as well, and with John Madden passing away, is there like a new display for him and everything?
One of the things that it's a great question, Andy, and one of the things that we're very conscious of doing is treating all the Hall of Famers as equally as possible. Certainly there are special moments and special times to celebrate a certain player, but I will tell you that, and we've had many discussions about not just Coach Madden, but it really he was one that resonated differently from others, and some questions arose. Hey, what are you doing special for Coach Madden? And I'll be honest with you, the answer really so far has been nothing. We feel like there's 300, and now with the incoming class, 362 Hall of Famers, 354 busts currently on display. And to single out Coach Madden is something that we're putting a lot of thought into, just because it's not necessarily our place to do that. While it might feel natural and might make sense to a lot of people, listen, it's really tough to say to the families of just to keeping it kind of in a coaching fraternity. It's very difficult to say to the families of Coach Knoll or Coach Shula or Coach Landry or Coach Hallis, hey, we're doing all this really wonderful stuff for Coach Madden. We hope you understand, because they probably would, but that's really not what we strive for. Our mission is to honor the heroes of the game, and that's everybody as equally as possible. So it is something we're talking about, and I do think that you're going to see you'll see something with Coach Madden's name on it, I think, at some point in the hall, but it's something that's going under some very, very deliberate conversation.
Well, when you talk about the Hall of Fame, I think you talked about a lot of the older history, and this will be my third time visiting. I feel like with the Hall of Fame, it's something you have to visit multiple times just to really take it all in. I mean, there's just so much there. I mean, I'm excited to see it again. Obviously, I'm excited to see it through my kids' eyes as well, and just how they've enjoyed the NFL. But it's just there's so much there, isn't there?
If there is, and that's one of the reasons we're excited about the development of Hall of Fame Village as well. Is if you're there's a couple of ways of looking at it. If you're that super fan and you want to spend a lot of time here, but you've got somebody with you who's maybe not quite into looking at every nook and cranny and reading every document and reading every graphic that goes with every display. Hey, I'll see you later. You run over, you walk outside and walk 20 yards back to our hotel room. I'm going to spend another couple of hours here. Or if you kind of reach that saturation point, it's like, right, you're at a museum and you've spent 3 or 4 hours and it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure I can take any more in right now. My brain needs a little break. All right, go back to your hotel room. It's 20 yards away, and come back the next day. And so that's partly why we're excited, to make not just the Hall of Fame a destination, but Canton, Ohio a destination, because there are things also, other than football to experience in Canton, Ohio. And we think it's a hidden gem in the Midwest. We're within a 6-hour drive of about 20 franchise fan base, homes.
Mm-hmm.
It is a place that we think folks are going to want to come to and spend that second day, or make an entire weekend out of it. Or if they've got a young person playing on the youth field in a boys event or a girls event or a co-ed event, hey, listen, you're literally from that youth field to the front door of the hotel when it's built will be about a quarter mile, and it's just all going to be on this campus, and it's all going to be fantastic. And I sound like a marketing person now.
That's exactly right. I mean, we're going to be staying. Oh, well, we're going to Cedar Point, so it's not that far from Cedar Point. You have that, right. All of that drawn in. And hotel wise, we're actually staying in. I believe it's Elyria.
Yeah. Okay.
So try to be a little bit halfway between, but that will be nice if there's when there's that whole hotel there, and you just kind of like you don't have to worry about driving back and forth.
and we're doing a lot now with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And
Mm-hmm.
it seems like a lot of football players want to be rappers and rock guitarists or piano players.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of rock and roll people want to be football players too. There's a real affinity between kind of those two universes. And we're working with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to kind of cross pollinate a little bit with some displays, and just kind of reminding people, listen, they're only an hour. We're only an hour apart from each other, and make it a weekend experience or a midweek experience, for a couple days, and now's a great time to do it.
Well, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you taking your time. Where can everyone find you again on social media and everything?
So all of our social media tags are the same across all of our platforms. Pro Football HOF. And our website is profootballhof.com. You can get ticketing information if you're interested in an experience for the enshrinement weekend, or just to purchase tickets in advance. There is a discount if you buy online tickets versus buying them at the gate. So I would encourage folks to take a look at profootballhof.com and learn a little bit of the history of the game. It might, if they're thinking of making the trip, it's a great way to prepare for that. Just, capture a little bit of history, kind of get in that mood, get in the huddle. Call a couple plays and then break the huddle and come to Canton.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see it again. So I appreciate you taking your time. And once again, this has been NFL Outdated Cover 2 series on the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Thanks again, Rich Desrosiers.
Andy, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure for me, and appreciate you letting us share our story.
Thanks again.